This is Dan from the Loading from Loops podcast, where retired cops get together and say what's what. We share career stories, war stories, and talk about current events, and I hope you'll join us sometime. The question I'm answering today is, what do we mean when we say loading from loops? Well, back in the ancient times of the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, cops carried wheel guns, or what you might call a revolver, and those had a cylinder that carried 5 or 6 rounds. And on our gun belts in uniform, we had leather slides that had leather loops. Each loop held an individual cartridge, and after you dumped the ammunition out of the expended casings out of the cylinder, you would withdraw 2 rounds at a time typically and load them into the cylinder of the revolver until you loaded 5 or 6, however many rounds the weapon carried. And that's what we called loading from loops. Now, after a tragic loss of life, loss of police life, historic tragedy in Newhall, California in the early 70s, that entire concept was revisited and technology advanced, and we went from loops to dump pouches to speed loaders and eventually semi-automatic firearms, which made a lot more sense because under stress it's a lot easier to function with gross motor movements, large motor movements, operating magazines and so forth, rather than fine motor movements like trying to load a individual bullets into a wheel gun. So that's how that came about, and that's what we call it loading from loops, because it's just a reference to the old school way of doing things. And not everybody loaded from loops. It's on the podcast, and you don't have to load from loops to listen to it. So we hope you sign in and join in with us sometime. Thanks.